So I'm currently reading The Republic by Plato, and this is a book that is about 2,300 years old, and I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a very challenging read, in the sense that it's very dense, and so each page would take me at least a few minutes to get through. There are times where I have to reread certain pages, maybe twice actually. So in total, I'm reading a page three times because the ideas are just so compact. Now, I would argue that everybody should read old books and old texts, because the ideas in these texts have withstood the test of time. So, when you think about self-help books that are written in 2026, for example, a lot of those ideas are probably going to help you, right? But they're really only going to help you in 2026, right? With the technologies we use, the economic state that we're in, the the system of affairs of the world that we're in. And I don't think people realize how quickly those things can change. Um, the world is not as stable as we like to think it is, unfortunately, right? We live in a dynamic world. Now, the reason why old books can guide us through these, call them blizzards, is because the ideas, like I said, have withstood the test of time. You could be dealing with a problem today, and the solution could be found in a book that was written thousands of years ago. In fact, there's a pretty good chance that it was already discussed. A really great example of this is when you look through the teachings of Hinduism. Okay, now I'm not personally a Hindu, but every time I learn about a new concept from Hinduism, I realize very quickly just how, you know, just how rich Indian society is, right? When you think about the thousands of years of civilization that has, led to modern day India, you realize that there's a very good chance that, well, not that there's a very good chance, it's almost a certainty that the problems that you're facing today were faced by thousands of people over the course of human civilization, at least, right? In fact, there's a pretty good chance that there are millions of people who have felt exactly how you feel and are going through very similar situations. And the nice thing with these texts, like when you read through, the Greeks, or you go through what the Romans were saying, or the Persians, or the Indians, or the Chinese, Egyptians, it really doesn't matter. There's a very good chance that the what you're seeking is actually it's already been written about, right? It's already been discussed. And so, especially if you're dealing with stress, anxiety, a lot of those answers are in those books. Case in point, not as much in 2026, but I realized that in the late 2010s, Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism was kind of a trend, right? A lot of people were reading Marcus Aurelius. A lot of people were reading Seneca, and I think there's a famous author named Ryan Holiday who actually writes about those themes for the 21st century. Now, that's not a coincidence, right? The reason why a lot of people are going back to Stoicism and reading these thinkers is because those ideas work, right? Like their advice actually is very helpful to anybody dealing with stress. Now, that's just one example. By the way, I'm not personally a Stoic. I could get into why I prefer not to follow that ideology, but I recognize that there are a lot of really great um, benefits to it, right? I totally understand why people find that it helps them. And when I initially got into Stoicism, when I was in high school, I found it quite helpful. As I've kind of entered my 20s, I'm 25 now. At this age, I'm not personally a fan of it anymore, but I still recognize that there are a lot of nuggets of wisdom that I can use to improve my life. I mean, there's no denying that. Another really great example of this is religious texts. So, you talk to any Christian who finds peace in reading the Bible, it's because there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, right? The fact of the matter is, even if you're not a Christian, like I'm not a Christian personally, I'm a fan of Christianity for a number of reasons. I think that a lot of the teachings are great, but even as somebody who isn't a Christian, I can recognize how helpful the teachings of the Bible are. You can, no matter, again, like I said, no matter what situation it is, you could be under stress, you could have anxiety, you could be dealing with, the death of a loved one or something like that. You can probably find some story in the Bible that will help you through that. And again, these texts are still around for a reason, right? I guess like a good way of thinking about it is a lot of people say things like, "Oh, music from the '80s was so much better than today. Music from the '90s is so much better than today." But that actually isn't true, right? The reason they're saying that is because the songs that have persisted and have survived the test of time are still being played, right? And so people might listen to um, a really popular song from the '90s that is just phenomenal, and they would think, "Oh man, every song released in the '90s was like this." But that's actually not true, right? That song is still around because it was so exceptional that it's still there, right? And those exceptional songs from the '90s are way better than the hit songs that you would have in 2026 because we're talking about the best of the best, right? Of that decade. It's the same thing with books. It's the same thing with text. You're not going to find a mediocre book or text from, over 2000 years ago. You're only going to find the best ones, right? You're only going to find the ones that are actually meaningful. Now, I might change my opinion on that. I haven't really dug into that era too much. Like I said, I'm only reading The Republic, um, and that's kind of the starting point of Western philosophy. So I could be overlooking more texts. I really don't know. But the point of it is, if you think about the these famous texts from a long time ago, they are elite. They are going to add value to your life. For me right now, I'm somebody who loves political science. I love understanding what government is at its fundamental level. And I'm in the point of the Republic right now where they are actually talking about that, right? They're talking about, okay, why is it that we even have governments and societies to begin with? And they go through it very clearly, right? In the book, the main character is Socrates. He goes through it very, very clearly when he's speaking with other people. And it's just so beautiful to witness. It's so exciting to actually to be able to hear about this from people who were around 2000 years ago because it's true, right? Like whether I guess the way to think about it is if someone 2000 years ago told you about a math theorem, it doesn't matter that it was 2000 years ago. It still holds up today, right? And that shows how valid that math theorem is. And that's why it's just so cool. Again, I'm not saying that you have to read philosophy. It could be history, it could be literature. There's so much out there, but if you can devote just a few hours a week to reading older texts or just engaging with older media, you will appreciate the how do I put this? The constants in the universe, right? Because the reality is, like I said earlier, technology changes, political climates change, economic states change, things change. But there are constants in the world and in the human experience that you can really only understand if you read older texts and older books. So that's what I have to say for today.